Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, here in London, and Mr. Whitehead over in sunny Washington. Jace.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Excited to be here.
We've got another exciting episode today with another guest. It's Mike Sasaki. Sorry, Mike, Vice President of Global Head of Customer Success and Support over at MyTech Systems. So we're really excited to have Mike here with us. Mike's got a really exciting, quite exceptional background building support organizations and success organizations, and also with his time at MyTech, kind of partnering and building out with customers their customer objectives, what they're doing, and also putting together customer journey maps. So we're going to have a conversation today with Mike talking about customer journey maps and some of the really cool stuff that the guys at MyTech are doing. So really excited about this. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Jason. Thank you very much. I am equally excited to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, very welcome. I think that this is a topic that I know Jason and I have spoke before about this, and we can have had a chat earlier on. It's such an important topic as to how the time and effort you put in customer journey mapping, what it means, the results of it. So to actually have a kind of a focused conversation around it, I think it's going to add a real lot of value for our listeners. Why don't you, Mike, just as a start, I gave a kind of a little dotted intro to you there, but why don't you give the listeners a quick intro to yourself, your background, and what you're doing at MyTech?
Yeah, happy to. So I started up in customer success in 2008. I joined a startup, so I have a lot of startup experience, and my role was really to make sure customers stayed with us and that they actually paid us. So I didn't know it was called customer success at the time, but that's what I was doing. So I went from a 10-person startup, we were acquired, I went to Calidus Cloud, a couple hundred people there. We grew from 600 million to over $1 billion. I left Calidus Cloud, went to Oracle, got that huge company experience, and I took all of that and I landed at MyTech to build out their global customer success org. So I've had an interesting background, I think, in that I've had the startup experience, mid-company, and large, extra large with Oracle, and now at MyTech, where I've definitely learned the most that I've learned at any of my stops.
Of all those different kind of companies, can I ask, do you have a preference? Do you like the small scale startup? You've gone to massive global organizations like Oracle. What's your preference, and how have you found differences in customer successes there?
The grass is always greener in a way. So when I was at the startup, I was thinking, man, am I going to get paid tomorrow? And sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. And that's the startup world. And at Calidus Cloud, it was a lot of fun seeing a company grow from 600 million to $1 billion. I feel like I'm dodging your question. And then at Oracle is a huge company. So my preference is a company like MyTech, very convenient because I'm at MyTech now, but growing and starting something, but also having enough money that I know that the company has enough money that I know that I'm going to get paid when it's payday, and not so huge like Oracle, where it's so bureaucratic that I had to do 20 presentations just to make a small change, right, in our process. And that was painful. So I do like the size of MyTech, 300, 400 people, $700 million in market cap. I do a public company as well. That's my preference.
I know a lot of the stuff that you've talked about before, Mike, and when you and I spoke to each other the first time, you talk around the idea of programmatizing customer success. Could you talk to us a bit more about what you mean by that and why there's a need to do it like this?
Yeah, programmatizing customer success it's an evolution, right? So when you first join a company like MyTech and you're the first employee in customer success, you're really trying to get credibility first. And so you save a couple of customers, you turn a customer red to green, you give back time to the product team. When I joined MyTech, the product team was talking to customers all the time. If you can give them back time, give sales back time, you get credibility, you look like some sort of magician. How did you do that? How did you actually told a customer no and they didn't leave? So that's the first thing you do. And then you build up relationships and sales and advocates and things like that. But my ultimate goal was to programatize customer success, right? Because the thing about customer success is it's great year one, everyone's excited. Year two, it's are you growing revenue? Year three is this thing's really expensive. And unless you have this goal of turning it into a program where you can get more productivity from each headcount, and it's not growing linearly with the number of customers, that is the ultimate goal. And then you can also take advantage of the skill set, the natural skill set of each CSM, and plug them into the part of the journey, the customer journey, where they're strongest. And then you can really have a very efficient program and machine running that ultimately benefits the customer, because that's what you're trying to do.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. like to hear that idea of not having that, excuse me, that linear movement between staff and growth. I think that's really important. Can you talk us through what are some of the challenges or risks of this approach, and how many companies do you actually see taking this approach on?
Yeah, you're seeing more and more now, and for good reason. I think there's just more data that this is working. The challenges are there's a lot of work in developing the program before you see any benefit, and you're selling them on an idea that you think is going to work, and depending on how much capital you have, you're going to get people that buy into it or don't, and you have to invest in the beginning, and you have to convince someone that it's worth investing, right? So those are the challenges. The risks of programmatizing, I think, is if you set it and forget it, you're going to fail. You got to check in and make sure that you understand what success looks like, and that you are iterating, and that the program also involves other organizations. If the customer success org had complete control over everything, wouldn't that be nice? That's never the case. We're borrowing, begging for resources. So it goes back to having advocates, right, when you first start, because you're going to have to get that cross-functional interlock of internal resources. And without that, you have nothing.
Right. I love what you said too about getting people to invest in that long-term commitment, because I've seen many organizations, they'll set up a customer success team, they'll have them around for a year and hire some staff and maybe train them up, but they've lost that commitment and they get lost on the trajectory of, no, we're building this to get the value later. Any tips around how to do that, or what's been effective for you in terms of getting that willingness to invest in and to stick with it over the long term? So that's such a challenge, I think.
It is tough. And if it was easy, there would be a book written or a one pager and everyone would just follow it, because it would be so easy to get investment on it. I think there's a couple things. One, you have to, it goes back to getting the advocates, right, in the executive team. I've been fortunate enough to report to the CEO. That helps. And he understands customer success. That helps a lot as well. But let's say that's not the case. I think at a certain point, you have to lean into revenue and revenue growth. And that is something that I would have not said 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago when I started at MyTech. I was a pure CSM. I'm trustworthy. I'm a trusted advisor. I don't talk about revenue, blah, 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 all that. And that's shifted. So now you're starting to see customer success managers and leaders really lean into the revenue piece, because that's where you're going to get the investment. And so if you could forecast it out and say, we're going to grow revenue, and you have signs of that, that'll help. It all comes back to revenue. And I think one thing that I try to do is talk revenue from my level and up, and talk customer success from my level and down. And we drive revenue, but it's an outcome of doing the right things. But I will talk revenue to my managers and my peers all day long.
Wow, that's such a great distinction. I like that.
I think it's something that we've spoken about. It's the idea of commercial customer success. You are there to drive value for your customers and accelerate that drive to value. And I think that there has to be a commercial element to it. And I think that the discussion around resources and what a success team looks like, we've all been in that situation before, and you can see there's a lot of investment made to begin with. And then over time, I think when you aren't bringing the value that was expected, and maybe that was miscommunicated, they do become challenges, and the teams quite often you see them descale, kind of scale the wrong way. And that's a problem that a lot of startups have.
Yeah, absolutely. Lincoln Murphy, I was at a session that he did, and he said, it is a commercial relationship.
Yep.
In the business, it's a contract. They're paying you. It's a commercial relationship.
Exactly what it is. And it's a commercial two-way relationship.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Mike, go on, Jason. No.
I'm just following with that revenue discussion piece, because I think this is interesting. You've been there a while, you've gotten that commitment, and you've had the time to do that. Do you find it easier now that you have this proven success, and when you say to ask for additional staffing or resources, are they more likely to go ahead with it because they understand and it's implied there's going to be a revenue commitment or boost for that? Or is it still a challenge every day to get to fight tooth and nail for all the resources you need?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm glad you brought it up, because this is something that I hadn't thought about in a while. But early on, I sold, suddenly makes it sound like it's not based on facts. It is based on facts. I was aligned with the executive team on how we're going to decide when we need another headcount. You can use cost to revenue. We use that. So when cost to revenue gets to a certain percentage, time to hire. Of course, that sounds simple, and that changes. Now I go back to my CEO and say, hey, cost to revenue hit this certain number, time to hire. He says, not so fast. Let's develop a different staffing model. So now you layer on not only cost to revenue, but other things like how many customers can a CSM manage at one time, and how are we going to scale that up with this program? So luckily I have this program in place and I can connect the dots there. But it does get easier. I would say align on what metrics you're going to use to drive headcount. So then it becomes more of a math question than I think I need another CSM because I think so.
Wow, that's great. I like that.
With the customer journey, it can be a really complex beast, for want of a better word, and very difficult to get it right. Are there any kind of areas of it and parts of it that you'd recommend organizations and CS leaders to focus on initially, and why, and what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, it's all about onboarding. When I joined MyTech, we were going to introduce the CSM at go live, which could be 6 months later after signing or longer. We moved that up. So it's at signing, the CSM is introduced. One thing that we've changed this year, though, is that we've created during the onboarding part of the customer journey map, that onboarding phase, we've created a customer onboarding manager. So there's no CSM involved. Customer onboarding manager looks a lot like a CSM, more project management focused, and is responsible for getting that customer successful. And we have a transaction level that the customer must hit, and we deem them successful at that point, and then they're transitioned to a CSM. There's overlap, of course, during that transition, but the onboarding phase is the most important because it sets the trajectory, sets the relationship. And so we focused and we've doubled down on that investment in onboarding, and we are starting to see and will see it pay off in more transaction-based business. So the revenue coming in earlier means the transactions are coming in earlier at a significant amount. And so that's how we'll measure it.
Introducing that specialized role, the onboarding manager, has that been confusing or open for the customers? Of, we have the salespeople, now you have an onboarding manager, and then I have a CSM, and then I probably have, I'm assuming you have support in there as well too, somewhere along the lines. How has it been from the customer experience or customer's perspective of they understand when to go to whom, and at what point do they stop going to an onboarding manager and transition that relationship over?
Yeah, so there's really two roles involved in onboarding. It's the customer onboarding manager and then the technical resource, which is a solutions architect. Pretty straightforward, and you've seen that before. But the customer onboarding manager is that one throat to choke for the customer. What I found, and this is interesting, in the identity space, the term CSM or the role CSM, that's confusing because they're not used to having them. Banks, we work with a lot of banks, they have not seen a customer success manager before in identity. And so an onboarding manager, in a way, is a more understandable title than a customer success manager for them. And so that's how we communicate it. This is your person that you will work with, and we map together as well. And we do that in one of the first meetings. This is how we're going to map with you.
I think that's such a great point, because it is. I think you've got a number of challenges in customer success. One is your own business might not understand what it really is. And it actually was a podcast that we recorded just last night. There is still one of the problems we've got is it's still misunderstood, and it means different things to different people. Quite rightly, your own customer success is very specific to them. So you've got that misunderstanding, and then you're trying to position yourself to your customers as what it is. There's still a mystique to it, if you want, and people not understanding it. Is it part of support? Is it account management? And it is, I think the term in itself can confuse people. In the essence, you're there to help drive your customer success. So you could say it's very clear as to what it is, but a lot of people still misunderstand it.
I misunderstand it. If you tell me you're a CSM at a company, I don't know what type of CSM you are because that's so broad, the range, right? Yep. At Oracle, I was a much different CSM than I was at other companies. I did much less, as you would imagine. So it is confusing. I've thought about maybe just renaming the whole team identity consultants.
Yeah,
interesting.
I think it is the problem you've got is you're also competing now for time against other CSMs from other organizations.
Right.
So you've got one stakeholder or vendor that might be dealing with let's be very conservative. Say he deals with 5 pieces of technology. He's got 5 different CSMs who are all going to have a different approach. So it can get very confusing very quickly.
It can, and then that gets into my rant about business reviews and QBRs, and you have to understand that the customer that you have has probably 10 to 20 vendors. That's 80 QBRs a year you're asking them to do, right? So I have a whole thing on business reviews, but we could save that for another podcast.
Wow. So actually, I like one of the things you said a minute ago, like during the onboarding process, you really come up and figure together with them, what are we going to do? What is success for both of us? Can you share a little more detail around that and how that works? And frankly, are your customers used to working with a vendor that way? Or is that a completely new experience for them?
They're not used to it. So when I say we double down, we've added a data analyst to the customer success org. I was tired of having to ask for data analyst support. I have a technical account manager on my team. I was tired of having to ask for that resource. So we got to have control over that. And what we've done is within the onboarding piece of the customer journey, there's different phases, and we track how many days they're in each phase. And we can predict out with the data analysts, when are they going to be successful? What month are they going to be successful? And based on what they did that week or the data that we have for the week, we can see when they're going to be successful. And if it's too long down the road, we can make adjustments. So we have measurements in place for each phase. We have a number of days that we think they should be in each phase. We have alerts that go off if they're over. If they're under as well, that's great. And then the ultimate measure is this term successful in production, and that's a transaction count that they must hit. And if they're on track to hit that, great. If they're not, something's wrong and we got to fix it.
Wow, great.
When we're looking at the kind of customer journey process and starting it off, what's the right way to go about putting together a program to do this and this kind of programmatizing customer success? How do you start the program off? How do you get the sponsorship and buy-in?
Yeah, you got to identify the key moments, right? The moments that matter for the customer. What are those? One is onboarding, right? The other is around go live. And once they hit successful in production, that's important. And I think one thing that we haven't done yet that we're going to do is we're big believers. I am a big believer in NPS. I know NPS has been around for a while. A lot of customer success leaders don't like it. For us, it's the right measurement. And I wanted to turn it into a customer journey based NPS. So at each moment that matters, we NPS them. So then you can line up your NPS scores at those moments, like in onboarding, and you can see what the scores are and if you have a problem there or not. Sometimes the problem that's shown in an NPS score is not easily tied to what part of the journey they're talking about that you need to fix. So it's a good way to line it up. I don't think I answered your question, Jason. I started going off on a tangent about NPS.
That's fine. That's cool. No, that's cool. This is why we do this. We like these conversations. I think I don't think there's a single podcast we've done where you stick to script, even the ones we have. But NPS is absolutely fundamental, but it's more, how do we start this? What are some of the key things? Is NPS and the results of NPS, does that become the trigger for it? Or are there other things that might happen that kind of trigger?
Where do you start the onboarding program?
Absolutely.
So you have to determine what metrics matter that you can measure. For us, it was successful in production. There's a transaction count. That matters to us. So then you center around, that's important to us. What leads into that? And the number one thing was onboarding. That leads into it. And so that's why we focused on it. I think I've been saying onboarding a lot, but for us, that's super important. For others, I would guess that's super important as well. But that's not the end. Successful in production is not the end. Lincoln Murphy has this thing where he says, if a customer is not growing, that's a health risk. And I agree with that. If a customer is staying flat, that's a problem. So then you got to programatize that part of it, right? The expansion piece. So after the customer hits successful in production, what is the next part of that program? And who needs to be involved? And what does that look like? That business review looks a lot different than it looked like during onboarding. And I'm a big believer in not having business review templates, a generic template. I've been in business reviews. I go in with my generic template. I talk for an hour and they're like, great meeting, great deck, whatever. I couldn't tell you what we learned. I couldn't tell you the value. I couldn't tell if we got anything out of it, and they probably couldn't either. So I think it's really important to look at each phase differently. And it even comes into like how you design the business review.
I think it is so important. You're so right that there are very different phases. You've almost got journeys per phase. You've got a kind of a top level way of doing it, but then individual, break it down at more detail, and you get down to a very granular detail. And it may be different people that are leading those segments of it.
That's the key, right? So you have different people leading each phase. We're not there yet. We have a team leading the onboarding phase, and they will just do onboarding. They will get really great at onboarding, and they have the skill set for onboarding. I can't put another CSM in that onboarding role, which is the mistake I made if we're talking lessons learned. I thought every CSM could do onboarding. So I know I can't. I'm just not good at that. My project management skills are weak, and I know that. And that's okay. I'm strong in other areas, but you got to put people in the places where they're strong. And another thing with people that are CSMs is there's a lot of focus on improving their weaknesses. I do the opposite. I focus on their strengths. I'm not interested in improving their weaknesses unless they're really bad, but let's focus on their strengths. Let's put them in the right position. So project managers, onboarding, expansion people, put them there, right? Red to green. If I need to turn a customer red to green, it would be nice to have a program for that. This is your red to green specialist. So things like that.
That's fantastic. I'm curious about two things there. One, you mentioned that was a lesson learned around that. I'd love to hear some of the other key lessons learned that you've had. And then also as well, if you could share some of the success stories that people might not know about that would inspire them around the approach that you've taken.
Yeah, other lessons learned. I would say that's a good question. And I have a ton. So I'm stalling to try and pick the best lesson learned here. I think the idea that things have to be dialed in before you launch a program, I'm not a fan of that anymore. I think starting, getting data, iterating, iterating, things like that is really important to do. And so I would do that. And that was a lesson learned for sure. Another lesson learned is overhiring. I think a lot of leaders get the head count and they fill it. And I think that's a mistake early on as well. And then some of the successes is really just shrinking that for us to successful in production and having control of the customer's journey and being able to predict and communicate out. So when we first started, we were really bad, and it was my fault at communicating out how these customers are doing. Now we have a weekly meeting, and we just had one today with 45 people, including the C-suite and VPs. They come to learn about our customers, how they're doing. One thing we talk about all the time are our pilots. How are our pilots doing, and how are onboarding customers doing? I don't care if you get tired of seeing it and hearing it, you are informed. And that's super important to do. And so that is something we didn't do before. I was like, everyone knows it's a big customer. So that's been a huge success in informing the company, the stakeholders. And then if we need help, we don't have to brief them. They're aware of what's going on. And so you can get help a lot faster. Oh, you need help with that customer? Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm aware I need some of the details, but I'm aware of them, right? It's not like a customer I've never heard of before that I'm being brought in to help. So things like that are successes.
You know, I like that too, because so many people that we talk to, they struggle to get the internal understanding of what customer success does and the value that you bring. And it sounds through that regular repetition and highlighting the challenges and where they're going and the successes. That's a great way to get people to really understand, oh, these are the problems you're solving and where they are. And I think a lot of more organizations would benefit from doing something like that.
Yeah, it's helpful. Customers are why we're here, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't want to come to that meeting, that's the problem. And I have the support from the top down as well. He shows up every meeting. So that helps.
That's
if
huge.
He's going to show up, I should show up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah.
Now, for meetings like that, is it just your leadership that's invited and allowed to attend, or is it open to the whole company?
I open it up to anyone that wants to learn about our customers, and especially nowadays when we're virtual.
Yep.
It's no different to me if it's 10 or 100. We've been around 45, but it wasn't always 45. It used to be 12 people, but we've been doing it for 3 years now. It just grew because we're talking about customers and interesting stuff, and why not join? You don't have to prepare anything. You just got to sit there and listen.
Do you find them well attended? Do they tend to get a lot of internal people wanting to join them?
Yeah, 45 people. So that's a big, that's probably our biggest meeting attendance wise. I mean, it's across different functions as well.
Yeah.
Finance is there for their finance reasons. Support's there for support reasons. Executives, they're there. Our CFO, he's a big fan of it. He attends because he's out there talking to analysts. So he wants to know what customers are doing and the challenges we're having. And so everyone comes for a different reason, but we run it out of a system. I used to have to prepare a deck every time. That was painful. We run it out of a system now, and that's changed everything. And we have a readout that goes out the night before. So we don't have to cover everything. We can hit the highlights, but you have the readout. It's in your email, goes to 100 people or so, and just read it and come with questions, but we'll hit the highlights as well.
I like that. That's a really good way it's this idea of democratizing customer feedback. You can have got a high idea of what it is, and all the team are seeing it and seeing it as is. That's really cool. Mike, a big thank you. This has been a really great conversation. So many great insights. I love kind of the ideas that you've brought from what you've been doing at MyTech, with some of the ideas there to build the team up there. This last conversation around how you get those customers into your meeting and the rest of the team there. So a huge thank you for us. This has been a really cool conversation.
Yeah, thank you to you both. And thank you for what you do with the podcast. Huge fan. It's great stuff, and I enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you.
I knew we had one, Jason. I knew we had a fan. We found him. So Mike, that's really cool. Look, what we always like to do, just the way we do this at the end of our podcast, is give what we call our bold challenge question to our guests. And the one we'd like to give to you is, how can our listeners ensure that their customer journeys really map to what their customers actually want? So how do they know they've got it right?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because you can design a program and you can set it. And like I said before, setting it and forgetting it is the wrong way to do it. Before you even start, you need to talk to customers. And I've seen a lot of customer success leaders that surprisingly don't talk to customers. And so you need to do that. And I try and do that as much as I can, even if I'm just sitting there listening. And then I can set up meetings with the customers separately, the executives there, and I can ask them, this is how we view the world. Is this how you view the world? And you need to do that consistently. And it's a lot of effort, and not a lot of leaders do that. So do that, challenge your program. Is this working? Look at the metrics. Are these the right metrics? And it's painful, right? Because often you find out, gosh, this isn't working. These are the wrong metrics, or maybe I need to iterate it, right, and change things up. But just say you need to really talk to customers and question yourself, look yourself in the mirror and say, am I doing this the right way? Does this make sense? Look at the surveys, look at NPS. There's plenty of feedback. That's the other thing. Look at the feedback, look at the data. As much as we want to go out there and do other things, a lot of the answers are already, within our reach. You just got to look at it. And a lot of leaders, including myself at times, are not looking at that stuff that is available. So that would be my recommendation.
I think that's such a good point, because the data is there and it's a understanding what it really means. And that's one of the gaps we've got now. There's lots of silos of data, but how do you get it together so that you can make decisions from it?
Exactly. Yep.
Awesome. Mike, look, a massive thank you. It's been great having you here talking to us. So a big thank you to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take care.